My name is Olaf Morgenroth. I am the head brewer at Fermentis Academy. So basically, I oversee the day-to-day runnings of the Fermentis Academy. That includes our technical hall, which has our brewery, as well as our labs. Fermentis Academy, it's basically there to act as a resource for fermenters, with mostly focusing on marketing, applied research and development. I think what I like most about the Fermentis Academy is that we have a 20 hectoliter brew house that we divide into 50 fermenters. So we can do a 20 hectoliter brew and we divide it into 21 hectoliter fermenters. That just gives us a lot more consistency because, as you know, every time you brew, while you try and keep things as consistent as possible, you are going to have natural variation. But with this, we start off with exactly the same wort. From there, we can change things like pH, temperatures, yeast strains, and that way we actually get to really understand how our yeast behave by changing usually just one or two parameters. Commercially, in the last few breweries I worked at, I have used a lot of Fermentis yeasts. 80% of our yeasts were Fermentis. And I mean, the main reason I ended up using Fermentis so much was consistency. So we quickly saw that with Fermentis yeast, we had much higher consistency. Each batch was pretty much similar in terms of fermentation to the previous one. We hydrated our yeast as well, which towards the end, we actually started doing direct pitches. We personally didn't see a big benefit to hydration. If your brewery isn't set up for yeast hydration, in terms of being able to do it consistently, in terms of being able to do it sterilely as well, direct pitching makes a lot of sense. At the end of your brew day, you can put in your yeast and almost forget about it. The only change that we usually make is when we start our wort transfer, we'll put in the yeast right in the beginning just to give a bit of natural mixing to the yeast. But besides that, the results we've gotten between hydration and direct pitching, it really makes a lot of sense to just direct pitch the yeast. You're cutting out a lot of risk as well. So what a lot of these brewers would do would be to boil a big pot of water, let it cool down, hydrate the yeast, open up the fermenter, a lot of times climb on top of the fermenters with a big pot of hydrated yeast. So it's not always very ideal. If you can just put in your yeast, and not having to take all of that into account, it makes your life a lot easier. I must say I really enjoy making lagers, a lot of German-styled lagers, Marzens. I enjoy IPAs as well, but I think in terms of drinkability, I think German-styled lagers are definitely my favorite. For lagers, I mean, 3470 I think is one of the most robust yeast strains on the market. I mean, always produces very consistent results. I think one thing also I enjoy about 3470 is it can handle warmer temperatures as well, and still give very similar clean results. So I think 3470 can actually handle slightly warmer temperatures. I think the biggest surprise in terms of the yeast strains was K97. A few years ago I was really just using it for cultures we were making, and now it's a very popular yeast to use in making hazies, making very hop-forward IPAs. So I think that was one of the more better beers we made. We made a sour IPA using K97, which came out fantastically. I'm sure you know the saying, brewers don't make beer, it's the yeast that make beer. Brewers merely create an environment for the yeast to create a good beer. So I think if you create a fantastic environment for the yeast and you use Fermentis active dry yeast, you are pretty much guaranteed a good fermentation. Keep your yeast happy and you'll definitely have a good beer at the end of the day.